Now, in this section, we'll be talking about while loops. I hope the learning is coming really good, and I believe you understand for loops well. And if not, please do go back and try some of those out. Do ask any questions that you may have. Feel free to write to us or post your comments, and so that we will be able to answer them for you. Let's move on in understanding while loops. While loop is also a part of Python statements, and it's one of the most general ways to perform iteration. In some form, while loops are dangerous, because I'll explain to you why. And coming back, a while loop or a while statement rather will repeatedly execute a single statement or a group of statements as long as the condition is true. The reason it's called loop is, again, because the code statements are looped through over and over again until the condition is met. Now, here is a general format of what while loop is. While you're doing something, there's a code statement, else the final code statement. While is called a statement because it's used with the if, the else, or the elif statements. Let's look at a few examples or few simple while loops in action. I'm going to switch over and to Jupyter Notebooks, and let's start some coding. Great, I'm on my Jupyter Notebook, and we got to learn about loops. I'm going to call while loops, and we will name the notebook and save it. Now, let's start with something simple as what we did last time. I'm going to call x is equal to 0, for example, and then I'll say while x is less than 10, then print that x is currently something. Okay, I'll say like this, and I will print this as x. Okay, now let's say print x is still less than 10, adding 1 to x, right? And I will perform a assignment and an addition. So this is an addition and an assignment operation 1. So until x is less than 10, I want a 1 to be incremented to my variable, and the variable value should be changed until the x becomes less than 10, as long as x is less than 10. So there you go. So it should ideally print 10 times from 0 to 9 and keep on adding until the last condition is met. Right. So notice how many times, once again, if you like to see how the while loop kept going, kept looking until the true condition was met, which occurred once x became equal to 10. It's important that we note this occurred and the code stopped. Now, let's see if we add a else statement and what happens. And so I will take the same thing and I'll add a else statement. Great, something like this. All right, let's see what happens. And the last one will be after it has completed. Right, so this is how it works, and there is also something called as break, continue, and pass. Now we can use break, we can use continue and pass statements in our loops and add additional functionality for various cases. And here is a visual of how that works. And now on your screen you can see that breaks out of the current closest and closing loop. Continue goes to the loop of the closest and closing loop, and pass just passes it on and does nothing. So let's think about how we can use break and continue statements. Let's say it is something that gives you to use multiple if statements within a while statement, as we show it in the visual there, and the continue also can help you add more functionality as much as break does. So break and continue can appear anywhere within your loop, but we usually put them further nested in conjunction with the if statement, so it's more appropriate, more useful, and we feel more in control, and helps us perform an action based on the same condition, so we don't deviate from our original condition. And so we couple break and continue with the if and else statement, or sometimes with just a if. Let's go ahead and look more examples in my screen, and let's go back to our same example. I'm just going to copy the same thing until we have this. Okay, and all right, so I'm going to add a if column here. Oops, if x is equal to 3, then print x has now become equal to 3. Let's just make it more useful, 3. All right, great. So I hope you're with me on this, and I'll say else print I am continuing, right? So until x is equal to 3 it prints, and after that it continues. I am moving on, and I'm going to I'm continuing. I think that makes sense. Let's add more appeal to this, and then I would add a continue. Okay, let's see what happens if I run this. Right, it has gone all the way to 10, and it will keep on continuing. It doesn't end at else. The reason I added continue, see what happens if you remove continue, or if you remove else. See what happens. Just remove else and have only continue. Check what happens when you have else. I'll leave that to you for experimenting, but you can notice that it printed 3. After 3 it ran a loop only between the else, right? It would come, x is already 3, okay, then what should I do? Print I'm moving on, continuing, and then continue. When you say continue, it puts Python back to the first line of code and execute all the way from the beginning, and that's what continue does. Let's see what break does, right? So I'm going to take the same thing, and going to use the same code because it's a pretty relevant example, and now that we've already gotten deep into understanding how this works, I will add a break here and see what happens. Okay, just for the heck of it. And when you say break, once this condition is met, it stops. It does not continue after that. So break will break what you want to do, and how it did not and how the statement did not go to else, and continuing never happened. Now, after these short examples, you should be really comfortable in using statements in your code. Just a word of example, if you don't have a proper validating statement, I'm going to write an example. Okay, if x is equal to true, or let's make it something, while true, print this crashed my browser, took me to infinite loop. I would recommend not to try this, but if you're in an experimentation mode, go ahead, run it. It's just a browser. Make sure you have your favorite tabs and everything saved. Your chat windows are closed on your if you have anything on your browser, and so you don't have anything important, because if you run this will crash your browser. Because it takes you to an important infinite loop, because the condition is always true. There's nothing to validate against. There is no end to this. Great. And I now believe you have a good hold of understanding statements, understanding for loops, while loops, understanding how break and continue works. And this is the fundamental of Python, and you have made it this far. You can now go about and create a lot of programs. You can automate anything with just this. We haven't even begun to learn programming, but we know so much already. The next up, we'll be talking about something more in Python, and after that I will spend some time to show you all the powerful things you can do with Python with just about what you've learned so far. And all of this should make you enjoy. I know it might be really tough at sometimes when you take on coding yourself. For that, I will give you frameworks as we go through the course, so you will be able to decipher and dissect problems and break them down to be able to solve them. And that potential, when we get that basics right, you can go about becoming a great developer yourself and learn not just Python, any language that may come in decades to come. So I wish you all the best, and keep the same focus, keep going. See you in the next class.